Doug Henry, Dean of the Honors College and one-time Associate of Darren's in the Institute for Faith and Learning. We are all truly grateful for your leadership, Darren. In as much as part of my professional story runs through IFL, I watch each year these convenings and the good that comes of them. Sometimes a mindful good that we don't know, but that plays out in your own personal narratives and the ripple effects of those upon people the world around. What a blessing it is to be gathered. So Darren, your staff, we are truly grateful. Ann Snyder is editor-in-chief of Comment magazine, the tagline of which is Public Theology for the Common Good, and the vision of which expresses devotion to seeing, healing, and strengthening our social architecture in light of 2,000 years of Christian social thought. Within the pages of Comment, Ann speaks with grace and conviction and clarity and wisdom. She also, when she writes, to my everlasting gratitude and benefit, with a rightly wielded critical edge at appropriate points, as she points to sometimes lamentable lapses in Christian commitment to the common good. Among her own recent entries in the magazine are Against Ideology, Embodiment Grace, O Virtue, Where Art Thou? Sowing for Trust, S-O-W-I-N-G, but maybe you could S-E-W-I-N-G for trust as well. Wisdom for the Wilderness, The Tribes That Bind. Ann's talents as a writer and as a hospitable friend who invites others into lively and productive conversation spaces took beautiful shape in 2020 in Breaking Ground, in this collaborative web commons launched during a period of global pandemic and economic recession and, in American life, racial unrest, ongoing political spite. In that context, I cannot count the number of times I found encouragement and renewed hope as I found my way into this commons that Breaking Ground provided. And often my solidarity and shared lament, and out of that lament, longing for things that we have yet to realize, to accomplish, if we are to be about public theology for the common good. Ann is the author of The Fabric of Character, A Wise Giver's Guide to Renewing Our Social and Moral Landscape, and co-editor with Susanna Black of a forthcoming collection of essays entitled Breaking Ground, Charting Our Future in a Pandemic Year. An alumna of Wheaton College and Georgetown University, she comes to us this afternoon to address the conference theme in a wonderfully provocative, interrogative grammatical mood. Her title is Accountability. Is it even possible anymore? And please come on up. We're ready to be held accountable.
Thank you so much, Doug. That's very encouraging. You don't always know where your words go, and it's just really nice to know someone on the other end received a few of them, so thank you. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more. Also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. It's very good to be back in Waco. This is kind of my first time here, certainly since the pandemic, and more specifically Baylor today. I spent an adulthood cementing set of years in Houston some years back, which, due to some large and sudden losses in the fabric of my life that had occurred just prior to coming to this great Lone Star State from the East Coast, just really taught me how vital institutions are to the holding and tending and forming of human beings, for good and also for ill. During those years in a city somewhat far away by car, I befriended a woman who had long Baylor roots going back generations and was then applying her mathematical genius to the good work of the Texas Hunger Initiative, which many of you or some of you may know. Over sporadic visits and through her generous but also ironic eye for Baylor as an institution, Waco, in its what was then sort of unexpectedly rapidly changing fixer-upper explosion, her intricate knowledge of the nuanced diversity, it turns out, among Texan Baptists, which was a whole new world for me, and her own heart for the underdog, and that what good can really come from Nazareth, a kind of wink applied to Waco. I became, in turn, puzzled and then charmed by all the idiosyncrasies of what I now think of as one of the more religiously fascinating and certainly eclectic plots of square footage in the US. There is a hidden complexity to Waco that frankly reminds me of the confoundingly complicated American Christianity of which I am both a student and an alien sometimes, a rebel, but also a fish within its streams. And I must say that this northern Wheaton grad has also consistently tasted a very notable romantic taste to Baylor's strain of Christian humanism, kind of like an intellectual cathedral here, hushing what I think I know and inviting me simply to explore familiar paths, become fresh once more, further up, further in. I'm going to repeat the beginning. Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So, a little per Doug's words, the title that I chose for this message may strike you as overly rhetorical. Is accountability even possible anymore? But the backdrop for this question is sincere. It seems that so many of our most unforgiving debates at both the largest levels of political philosophy and the most daily levels of personal need revolve around a too long starved human desire to be accountable to someone, to something. Because, of course, the ability to account is predicated on the gift of belonging to someone or something. The possibility of accountability means that you, I, have someone to hear me, to see me, someone particular, something real. Maybe, if we're lucky, someone and something true. But this is where the rub is, maybe especially today, right now. What are the bounds and identities of those somethings and someones we should be compelled to belong to? How do we ensure that they don't hurt or betray or abuse us? We have grown so accustomed to the habits of unprecedented personal freedom in the history of the world that as much as we yearn to live in a place of transparency and truth as human beings, we're also totally terrified of it. We're terrified of being exposed. And less existential, but still very real, we modern folks, at least in the West, we just chafed against the idea of being owned, at least consciously, by anyone or anything but ourselves. Our time, our possessions, our dreams, our complex relationships, our multi-context lives, our toing and froing, our Google searches, all these seem much easier, even right and proper, to keep to the realm of private choice and private power, to our seemingly autonomous will that needs to survive the frenetic chaos that is modern life and enjoy a little pleasure to keep us going along the way. Life is hard and loud and overwhelming, and so we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to have the freedom to stay a little morally creative while enjoying the saving graces of community when we need it. We want to be able to eat at an expensive restaurant by night while decrying economic inequality by Zoom, often on a highly curated green screen by day. We want to worship God and watch football on either minute of the noonday Sabbath. I know that's a dangerous thing to say in Texas, but we want to know our neighbors, but not too frequently, and so on. Deep down, I think we all crave, or most of us crave, a more consistent life, but forces beyond our telling are making us settle for barely concealed hypocrisy, or perhaps less morally loaded, but still a cause for misery, constant compartmentalization and disintegration. And slowly but surely, what has already eroded our common life is beginning to erode our actual lives, most notably those of our kids. For if we belong nowhere and to no one, and nothing coherently shared with others, who cares what we do or don't do, say or don't say? If the only nudges behind our behaviors find their motivation in anticipating a vague, if visible, public response, whether our excesses, on the one hand, are checked by fear of social reprobation, or encouraged by a desire to seem clever or righteous or beloved or good. And these behaviors are often happening as we sit alone, broadcasting what are essentially our insecurities to the vast stage in hopes of securing validation from a wounded and undisciplined world. How are we not folded into a recipe for total social and moral suicide? Somehow we have both intentionally and accidentally found ourselves in neutered oceans where everything is overwhelming and yet very little of actual world-shifting significance is required of us, where we are always at risk of being shamed and judged at the same time that it kind of seems like no one actually cares. We are living in times that are a bit ecclesiastical, and there even without a cultural memory of wisdom. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So the good news is that there are still wise ones in our world, luminous lily pads, as I call them, and by that I mean sort of richly accountable communities scattered throughout the land. And they are not only choosing to tie themselves down to one large yes that precludes all the little yeses, but they are finding innovative ways with ancient nods to cultivate the pathway for others to make this large yes too. And there's just a particular story I thought I would share with you today whose rigor on the accountability question sheds light on an ideal that perhaps those of us living more fluid, multi-context, and I dare say free lives can work backwards from to reform our ways, even if just a little bit, to healthier, richer, ordered loves and living. So several years ago, a friend was telling me about this unparalleled moving experience he and his wife had had. They had endured a bad move the previous time, so were on a hunt for a much more professional, much more trustworthy moving company. His wife was surfing Yelp reviews, and she suddenly called her husband over. "Look, these guys get 5 stars, she said, and she kept scrolling to read the comments in more depth. "Whoa, this is different. Would you believe this praise? It's just everywhere, one after the next, just really high praise." Sure enough, every review for the other side movers, as they turn out to be called, commended exceptional integrity, swiftness, punctuality, and care. In an industry famous for not always being helpful in one of the more dreaded logistical upheavals in a household's life, the Other Side Movers were rated the #1 company in Utah. They're still rated #1. And if you read a little closer, a curious tagline graces their promotional literature. Our students might have some wild tattoos, these brochures say, but they are the hardest working, friendliest, most polite, and the most careful movers you can find. We take care of you as though our lives depended on it, because they do. I learned from this friend that the Other Side Movers were not your average moving crew. They hail from the Other Side Academy, which is a life training school for those with long criminal and addiction histories. Students commit to a minimum of a 2-year residency, many of them having endured anywhere from 2 to 20 years in jail or prison, some of them having been arrested as many as 25 times. About 3/4 of them will come as an alternative to incarceration, and about 1/4, while having been in jail in the past, will come in just walking off the street. So it starts right here with the bench, which is a very ordinary piece of furniture turned sacred in this setting. It sits in a crowded foyer in the back of this house. It's like a portal between the old life to the new one. There are 2 ways to become a member of the Other Side Academy. You can either walk in off the street or write a letter from jail. Most letters are very desperate. They say things like, "I'm at rock bottom. I've realized I need change, but I can't do it on my own. Please help me. I promise I'm worth a shot." No one is ever turned down from an interview, but the process is rigorous. Only 10% of those who apply get admitted. The brutal honesty that is the other side's hallmark turns many away in the first encounter. "Do you love your family?" Carrie, a student I met there, was asked on the bench during her first interview. When I met her, she had been a student at the Other Side a little over a year. "Of course I do," she remembers responding to this question. "No, you don't," came the reply, very hard and swift. "You left them. You would not be doing this crap to them if you loved them. I sure hate to see what you would do if you hated them." When she told this to me, I remember she kind of sucked in her breath and she was just remembering like the searing nature of this wake-up call to a more robust and frankly foreign conception of love. The purpose of that first interview here is to see if the person is willing to sit still and hear truths, often really hard truths, about their actions, their addictions, their motivations, behaviors, anything that has broken relationship with those around them and has divorced them from a society that they, as adults, should be contributing to in some way. There's sort of a social contract that's established right away in that first discussion that says, this is what whole person change is going to sound like for the next 2 years. Is this really what you want to be hearing? Are you ready? The bench is at once a birthplace and a grave. The idea is that life before the bench doesn't exist anymore once you arrive, one of the students said to me. At the Other Side Academy, past is prologue to the real living. If you go back there to the image you had of yourself as the tough guy, to your bravado that let you swagger around a jail identity, to the logic that motivated you to escape responsibility and damage others, you get sent back to the bench for 6 hours alone with your conscience, close to the door that could be your exit backwards. I sort of thought of it as like this wooden purgatory as you stare at the wall in front of you, as he's doing, and consider who you really want to be. These 12 principles suggest a pathway as you are sitting there. These tenets, all 12 of these, permeate the Other Side's way of life. The model is entirely peer-to-peer, which is important, and learned by doing. Everyone who sleeps overnight in one of the houses on the campus has either spent time in jail or struggled with addiction. There is no expert that sleeps overnight swooping in saying, I'm going to fix you. Rather, the whole premise is we're going to fix each other, and it doesn't matter how long it takes. Here's your conference. This particular principle of the 12 is really what everything at the Academy hinges upon, 200% accountability. It manifests specifically in a ritual this organization calls games. Now, games is a twice-weekly circle where the wrongs of the week get broken down and addressed to the offender's face. If a school rule is broken, say they're pretty strict about gender division because of some of the cultures that folks are coming from jail. If, say, a woman speaks to a man in the wrong hour, another female student will pull up, as they say, the offending student and say, "We do not do that here." Then the correcting student will take a piece of paper and write a note, put it in the games drawer, and come Tuesday or Friday, surround the offender with a tidal wave of feedback and exhortation. It gets colorful very quickly. There's a confrontation. I got to be present for one of these, and I was like, this is the most intense small group I've ever seen in my life, and I'd be terrified to be part of this. Oftentimes, you're not even aware that you're doing something wrong, but we are telling you, said Carrie again as she was narrating all this to me. We'll say, "Hey, Susie, that's not appropriate." And then other people will start jumping on that indictment saying, "Hey, come on, you're a leader. In this house, you know better. Come on, get it together." It's very much a culture shock for every newcomer, especially for those coming out of a prison ethos where you never tell on anyone else. "The last thing you ever do in jail is give feedback," Carrie said. "But here, if I care about you, I will give you feedback." After society giving up on them, there's sort of a shock of a call here to do better and a communal structure that pushes you to do so. A lot of the students often struggle to accept the love that is on the other side of the truth coin. Running the streets for as long as many of them have, they just don't know what it's like to be cared for. At the other side, every student experiences both the receiving and giving of discipline and exhortation while they're working together, cooking together, cleaning together, explicitly scrutinizing one another. It's kind of like this familial gem tumbler when it comes to critique and encouragement. Some people have earned wisdom ahead of others, but no one is privileged. So the Other Side Academy is completely self-supporting. The students run the program, which generates yearly income for the academy at large, and they've started businesses. The first company is the Other Side Movers, as you saw, which teaches everything from showing up on time to packing cleanly to sweeping the floor to eventually running the office side of the company. When I was there, they just had started a thrift store. When they moved different households, for some of the more affluent households, particularly in Salt Lake City, they'll end up with extra clothing, furniture, dishes, other items they would like to donate. And so the Other Side Movers have created this cute extra jingle on their business cards that say, "Let us come into your house and move your valuables. We've done it through the window before. This time it'll be through the door." Students have also started a construction company and a landscaping firm, culinary services, and a body shop. Some of the students sit in the campus basement for as much as 8 hours a day, making corporate development calls and sharing about the academy's work and mission. It's really not the particular skills of any one craft that the academy wants to develop. They're more concerned that you just learn how to get up every day, go to work, have a good attitude, do as you're asked, learn how to learn, go to bed, and do it again the next day. It's through the daily doing of the work and honoring customers' needs that students learn virtues that jail never taught them. So this is someone helping one put on a tie. Oh, the sound's not working, but. So this is meant to show each one, teach one. Of all the people who have entered this Other Side Academy in its first 3 years of existence, 75% have graduated in 2 years. Of those who have graduated, all are employed, and none have reoffended. After 2 years of hard work, brutal honesty, communal living, and gradual transformation, the Other Side Academy students get to a much longed-for day, graduation. Like everything else, at the other side, there's a physical monument marking the transition. In this case, a bridge that extends from the front door to the rest of their lives. When students are first admitted into the program, they are brought to the same east side of campus, where at the foot of the bridge, they make solemn promises to join the community and accept help for a new life. Graduation marks a return to this bridge with a walk back out into a watching world. The ceremony that I attended included letters read aloud from current students to the graduates, a message from the founder, and a set of vows that each graduate says before crossing over into the handshake of the most recent graduate before them, almost always in view of their families who have gathered there. It's very moving, and you can sort of see 1,000 shades of emotion rippling over all these faces who are at different stages of kind of this transformative journey. Scotty, oh, you have been a rock for me over the last 18 months, said one of the students to that day's graduate the day that I visited. There have been times here where I felt unimportant, lost, anxious, and misunderstood. Times when I needed clarity with certain crucial topics around family, love, connection, disordered thoughts, you name it. And you've always been there for me, always. Never once have you been at a loss for just the right words to cut to my soul and help my paradigm shift. You are authentic, talented, and beautiful. I love you, and I know that you love me. Your actions have shown it. Now, true to what we do here, I will pass on this gift of love and understanding to others. I was like standing in the families, and I have to say it was like a fairly strange thing for me to watch, mostly men, not all, but mostly men, with shaved heads and pockmarked faces and very tattooed up, just speak with such open emotion. Some of the watching students, you could see them sort of contorting their facial muscles. They were either too moved to show their emotions publicly, or they were maybe daunted by the path between now and their future selves. The graduates today having experienced what for many is only beginning. It's a beautiful and seemingly miraculous prospect, the transformed personalities that the freshmen and sophomores see in those who are graduating, but they know that the road to get there is going to be narrow and steep. Here are some just before, like entry and graduation shots, before and after. Then Scotty, today's the graduate that I saw graduate, spoke. I remember he said, right before I came here, I found myself yet again in that same situation where everything in life was crumbling, and I was ruining lives and hurting people and doing a lot of horrible things. I really was tired of doing all of that, but I didn't know what else to do. I really didn't feel like I deserved to see the world. I just wanted to die. I had already done 14 years of my life incarcerated, and I didn't want to keep doing it. So I wrote a letter after someone told me about this place. All I figured was it was better than going to prison, better than dying. So I got here and I thought, this is the weirdest place ever. These people are nuts. All the staff members would be nice and friendly, and then every once in a while they were really mean. It drove me crazy when I first got here. And then I realized that it was really my thoughts that were crazy. I had such a backward mentality about what the good was, about what self-respect was, where it should be rooted. I really didn't get it. He continued, after being here for 2 years, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that it's not all about me. It's about the next guy and the newest guy. It's about finding somebody who needs help and helping them. And that's the only way that I get better. I learned that from Lola and from Dave and all the staff here. It seems like consistently they are always trying to help the next person, and they showed me that so many times. You know, from the small things, like seeing somebody stuck in the snow on the side of the road and just stopping whatever we are doing as a house and jumping up and helping them. And here he looked over at his parents, who were kind of tentatively in the second to back row, and he swallowed and he looked at them and just said, just like you taught me when I was a little kid. As the 71 students that day and their families surrounded the one graduating, there was and always is at these ceremonies one person who's already graduated standing on the other side of the bridge. Oops, I was a little ahead of time. The new graduate will walk across it and say a final liturgy that reflects on the honest terrain of the state that he or she was in when they entered the academy, how they traveled through it, and what they promise as a community to do in honor of what it imparted, of the values it infused in them that will make them good citizens and servants of the work of transforming other lives, one moral compass at a time. Then the graduate closes the liturgy by saying, I promise to spend the rest of my life saving and serving others, just as you have saved and served me. Will you help me now as I do my best to live our beliefs on the other side? And then the staff and other graduates say, yes, you may now cross over. So this is the whole community in their various colors. So why do I tell you this story? What in a relatively ragtag group of people who once broke the law, some of them very badly, can the rest of us learn and translate to less dramatic contexts maybe, to more porous communities and large-scale institutions? Is anything in this translatable more broadly? I know this is a challenging story, particularly in an era when those who have given their lives to an institution, be it a denomination, a local church, a more missional workplace or organization, a marriage, have wound up experiencing major trauma as a result of being enmeshed in systems where disordered understandings of love have been seduced by lust-filled quests for power rather than the abundant beauty of truth. Most of us don't naturally live or work in contexts of radical peer-to-peer sharpening. For all the egalitarian impulses of the US, I think we still do exist in different modes of hierarchy, some of which is really helpful, some of which can be susceptible to abuse. Most of us move also, hour by hour, between a mixture of covenantal spheres and more transactional spheres, each one with different norms, different levels of intensity appropriately around accountability and authority. But in the great flattening of the world these days, and frankly the sort of attendant confusion of so much scrambling of these spheres, as I'm at least experiencing it these days, I just find this sort of one-stop shopping example helpful. I think we all secretly believe that if we were fully seen, we would not be fully loved. To be personal, this is totally the pre-conversion story of my own life in the face of who I understood God to be prior to the actual gospel breaking through. This is also the story we have decent reason to believe is true because of our repeated experiences of imperfect love in a still more imperfect world. But here, at the other side, truth and love come together, and they birth lives of transformation, rippling out in untold ways to transform families, neighborhoods, perhaps eventually a whole city. Simply put, it was at the Other Side Academy some years ago that I was just dramatically jolted into a much higher vision of what it means to be a person of character, but perhaps more interestingly and strikingly, what it looks like to belong to a thriving, rigorous community of character, one inspired by an organization's mission and institutional norms that were both verbalized and practiced, one that chisels and inspires your best self to come forward day after day, relationship by relationship. Here in real life, real practice, were nearly 100 men and women having spent years, some of them decades, in sort of a hellhole that the average citizen disdains, now tutoring me with their lives that had grown not just to appreciate, but to love the good, lives graced by humility, honesty, conscientiousness, diligence, courage in choosing right, discipline and self-control, perseverance, personal responsibility, hearts willing to forgive and to seek forgiveness, and crucially, people who had learned how to discern the quality of character in others. And it wasn't an individual enterprise of pulling each one of them up by their own bootstraps idealistically, relying on self-will and a verbalized set of ideals alone. It was really a communal labor. And it was a community that was not just surviving, but thriving because of some intentional principles that I began to see elsewhere in other sectors. The Other Side Academy is one of hundreds of organizations that a few years ago I had the privilege of visiting pre-pandemic, from sports teams to social reweaving efforts to adult learning communities to schools to artistic colonies and retreat centers to some for-profit companies with an intentional moral culture woven in. And the best among all of these different kinds of organizations traced a similar pattern. When I would encounter positive transformation and relational health, humility in the individuals, but also inspiring moral beauty, just going further up and further in. They all seem to have two things in common: trust and love. People had come to trust the community or institution, and they'd also come to love it. So I just wanted to know, how do we make more of our mediating institutions more worthy of trust and love? Aren't we all craving mediating institutions that are worthy of a yes, that is an expression of our bigger yes to God? How do we grow leaders that can then nurture these kinds of organizations and communities? So unfortunately, I don't have a 3 or 5-step technique to answer this question, but I have discovered some intrinsic goods that seem to lie at the heart of every flourishing collective of people I've found across culture and social class and social sector. When I would find an institution that exuded the capacity to transform people and communities for the better, they seemed to have a set of traits in common. Conditions that allowed them to be trustworthy, love-worthy institutions that they were and are. These are conditions that tend to be countercultural, they're communal in nature, and as I've observed them, they do transcend differences in race, class, and life stage. They just meet fundamental, arguably universal human needs. I'm going to share them with you in the form of questions, and invite you, as I do, to think about Baylor, if you work here, or are a student here, or wherever institution you find yourself spending the most hours, also to think potentially about a church, the community, or organization or institution that just grants you the most ballast, makes a felt difference in your life today, in part because it requires something from you. And as I share these questions that are normative in nature, I just want to see if the examples you have floating through your mind answer them with distinction. And then we might have some clues as to the interwoven fabric that a healthy culture of accountability requires. Number 1, tell us, does this institution have a clear, strong reason for being in the world, embraced and pursued by all of its members? Does it give its members organizing criteria for what to love? 2, liturgies and rituals. Is there a covenant or creed that is affirmed regularly as a community in word and deed? Are there communal rhythms, routines, and rituals? 3, full engagement by all members. Are all members of the organization, regardless of position or stature, engaged in the mission and aware of the significance and contribution of his or her role? Power of the particular. Does the organization have a particular identity, a thick set of norms that gets passed on to its members? Does it have a unique quality that is recognizable in those it has shaped? Number 5, whole person. Does it have a clear conception of the whole person, head, heart, and helping hand, and seek to develop it? Are employees and departments integrated across domains, serving constituents in complementary, mutually reinforcing ways? Number 6, healthy relationships. Does the institution put relational health as the foundation for its success, as I can totally tell that IFL does? Does it foster social trust? Does it have a strong sense of community? 7, tech-wise, which is a phrase I'm borrowing from Andy Crouch. Is the institution careful about the latest technological advance, embracing it insofar as it promotes healthy relationships and individual skill, and setting limits when it makes those objectives more difficult? Intentional pluralism. Does the institution foster opportunities to relate to those unlike yourself? Are members consistently exposed to other worlds, trained in the arts of civility, deep listening, and cross-cultural agility? Struggle and growth. Are there opportunities for growth and tests of character? Does the organization have a process by which such struggles are given meaning and direction? Vulnerability and accountability. Has psychological safety been established such that individuals feel free to be honest? Is there a structure of mutual accountability? We're almost done here, guys. Are you hanging with me? Okay. 11, reflection. Are there built-in processes for reflection and excavation of one's inner life and public fruits? 12, exemplars. Are there attentive and conscientious authority figures who serve as role models, coaches, and mentors? Does the leader set the character standard for the organization? Number 13, agency and initiative. Are members of the organization empowered to act, create, initiate? Are they encouraged to be responsible moral agents, not simply passive consumers? This is probably my favorite one, 14, joy. Is there joy in the house? Are hospitality and unconditional welcome a key part of the institution's DNA? 15, transformation. Are there consistent testimonies of whole person change in a positive direction? And finally, what I just call generativity. When people depart from this formative institution, do they promote a similar culture in other contexts? Has the institution imparted a set of ideals that members want to live up to ever after? So these are just interwoven principles that have drawn my gaze over the years and compelled my feet over and over as I've just so hungry to find those communities and organizations that are granting people the great gift of belonging, of healthy formation, and of that primordial attention we all need that communicates something like this: I see you and I hear you. Is accountability in its fullest, most coherent sense possible anymore? To be honest, I don't entirely know. But perhaps one step in testing its possibility in a pluralistic age might be taking something like those principles or questions and holding them up to the institutions we love and are wounded by, and think creatively and courageously about how to allow this kind of moral cultural audit to hold our own institutions to account. Because yes, accountability is totally a two-way street. Properly lived, it requires our wills and discerning surrenders to the right and worthy loves. It requires thick webs of relational mutuality and also inconvenience. And it also requires an approximation of the kind of worthiness we sense, or at least I sense, Ruth saw in Naomi and gave to her in kind. Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. I am just asking you and myself these days, what would it require of our nation, our intermediating institutions, our own communities and community of faith, and of our own character as individuals to be able to give this kind of commitment, and from there to enter into one way, further up and further in? Might some of these principles and maybe this story today grant a compass or maybe a little key? Thanks.